Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. And, you'll laugh, of course, but, of course I have skipped a lot of sleep lately, both because of my nerves and, well, everything's happening, basically. And I also have to apologize because yesterday I had a conversation with Dan Carlin. Yeah, we spoke about an hour of podcasting stuff and journalism stuff, and just was very happy that I could steal an hour of his time to get some advice on life and everything and how everything works. And yeah, then I tried to reanimate my Twitter. And, well, apparently everyone helped out. I mean, thanks to Daryl and Dan Carlin and other people, basically we're up to from 300 or 400 to almost 2,000. Well, it's still a long shot from the 25,000 that we had before the ban, and that's on the previous episodes. But still, it's something, and at least my journalism contacts have noticed, so that's good. But what this means is that obviously a lot of these people who have now joined my Twitter, which is a bit too long to describe here, but I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, a lot of them probably don't know what Igor Girkin is, for example. So we're going to have to repeat a bit of the things that are, the regular stuff for all of you out there. But hey, we have new people. And the new people, we also have Discord, which is actually getting quite alive. But yeah, in general, by the way, about the whole system of this thing, how I organize my show, again, a thing which you guys probably need to know if you're new here. I do two types of episodes during this war. One of them is the long-form ones, which are interviews or something really huge. Those I send to my editor to get edited, and they get a theme song and everything. But as I, sometimes just spend stupid amounts of time working, and sometimes just things happen faster than I can cover them. These additional news episodes, they just come out whenever. Basically, when the going is tougher, they come out more often, and then on the quieter periods, they're slower. But they're not edited. They're just me doing the bare minimum of editing on my own end, cutting down the noise and stuff like that. Just because my editor works in Europarliament with doing sound editing over there, and she just isn't available at all times. So, well, it is what it is, and I hope that you'll forgive me. And you guys who are new here, you managed to pop in a kind of... Sorry, I'm also a bit ill, but that's also normal. You managed to pop in a kind of a lucky period of time, since I literally just replaced my microphone, so that's pretty good. Except my cat has taken a loving of cutting and chewing this microphone's wire, and it's a weird one that plugs in from the side and whatever. At any rate, well, I want to cover some things today that are not that covered in the mainstream media. For example, I will not be talking about all the atrocities again, because of course they have happened again. Of course they're very, very loud and public. But I recently did an episode on Russian army atrocities, and that was one of the heaviest stuff that I've ever made in my life. So I'd rather not. I just show respect to the victims. In the same way, I'm probably sure that you'll find out about the American guy who leaked the documents on your end. What I like to say about that, as that sort of needs to get mentioned, is that, no one's buying it on the Russian side, on the Z side, and not even like Solovyov is doing too much, the official propaganda situation there. Solovyov personally stated that, and I quote here, the access rate of this guy was 0.0. And that, even if it was real, to which, again, many don't believe, because the whole excuse of, he did it because he wanted to look cool, just seems so dumb that, of course, in this conspiracy-run environment, everyone on the pro-war Russian channel just refuses to buy it outright. Even Solovyov kind of doubts the legality of this situation. One thing that I want to mention, though, about document leaks is about other document leaks. Since on the April 13th, an article came out in New York Times. And they're just great. I mean, to those of you who listen to the show regularly, you'll understand why I find it funny. And I add another notch on my have beaten the New York Times here, because the article starts out with, the depth of the infighting inside the Russian government appears broader and deeper than previously understood, judging from a newly discovered cache of classified intelligence documents that has been leaked online. Yeah, well, to all of you regulars out there, It's not that, we've been talking about their infighting and how hard it is, and it contains nothing surprising you haven't heard on the show. It's just that apparently this is why I need this Twitter and social media, because they could have been focusing on other stuff, so to speak, because once again, it's just sudden surprise to all the Western mainstream analysts, and if they would have listened to a couple of my episodes, maybe they've made a bit more progress and their predictions would be better, but, I digress. Just happy about Twitter. The thing that I really want to talk about today and focus my attention towards is the whole new Russian draft. What has happened there, and also some adventures with Igor Girkin. But Girkin can wait a bit because this draft situation, the new mobilization law, as it's called, is very important. See, Russia's State Duma, literally like in 30 minutes, it was the speediest bill ever taken into law, passed a set of amendments. It took about 30 minutes, by the way, for a whole 3 readings. That will make it much harder for Russia's pacifists and those who don't want to join the military to actually evade the draft. And, these amendments will be signed into law by the president very soon. And these, well, I don't know. I translated the word, it means summonses. The thing that you get when you're summoned to go to the commissariat or something. I call them notices. I don't know. Summonses seems like a very weird word to me, but, Google Translate does it sometimes. And I need it for specific terms. So basically, they have thrown this whole notice system totally away. Like, completely. And these things will be delivered and published electronically in a system that nobody basically uses. And people who are subject to the army service, after that, will not be able to leave Russia, so that, the situation in the border of Georgia does not happen again. And furthermore, draft evaders will be barred from driving a vehicle, buying and selling real estate, and applying for credit. A unified digital register will have the draft officials access to personal data on potential conscripts. By the way, part of this register was made by combining the whole fan card that they used in 2018 World Cup. So that's another thing. I'm actually contacting some football YouTubers and podcasters to talk about that there, because it kind of doesn't fit here, but, have to spread the word around. Basically, these whole changes, my colleagues in Meduza, these guys run from Latvia, those of you who didn't know, they managed to grab a lawyer and a member of the Russian Human Rights Advocates Coalition for conscious objection to military service. Yes, that exists still, because, they can't really crack down on everything. They're busy with Girkin at this point. And, of course, the source is anonymous, but he told interesting facts there that basically turns this into a full-blown totalitarianism from just rough authoritarianism. So, the new amendment package, and by the way, this is important for the war as well, of course, because it means more people there and less willing people, once again, seeing how the previous were treated. This means that there's a package that has 4 segments, and this covers 4 areas: digitalization, appeals of draft commission decisions, establishing this register, and, of course, the contract military service, which is separate from the draft. This new law prescribes the creation of a unified register in which active these notifications will be recorded. The register is to be maintained by the Defense Ministry, but the details on how it will operate, of course, no one has ever bothered to do that at all. The amendments repeal the former guarantee that the state would provide a public defender for any cause involving violations of the draft law. By the way, that's also interesting. So, yet another violation of, basic human rights at this point, not even just laws, which they just ignore completely. Previously, any draft decision would be automatically suspended if appealed. The new legislation is just getting rid of this. Now, even if you're in the process of appealing a draft decision in court or with a higher level military authority, the decision itself will remain in force during the appeal. In the past, if a person was apprehended in the streets and delivered to draft office, he, or even his proxy, would have been able to object to the draft, the official's actions the very same day. And this important provision protected people from arbitrariness and from abuses of power by the draft officers. Well, not by much, seeing how the first how the first wave of mobilization went on, but, up to a point. It's still possible, technically, to appeal this decision, but it wouldn't be a reliable defense against being sent to the army barracks. A court still has the power to suspend the execution of a draft decision, but it can also dismiss the motion to suspend it or simply just take too long considering it or whatever. As a result, a person who might be ineligible for army service for medical or other reasons would, under the new laws, just have to join nonetheless. Then they are shifting the burdens of compliance and making draft evasion way harder. See, if a person has been summoned to the draft office and doesn't report for duty in 20 days, he's going to be barred from doing things like registering as an independent contractor, working as a self-employed professional, applying for credit, driving a vehicle. Applying for credit, by the way, also accounts for credit cards. Yeah, you're banned from using those. Or registering a car tile. The new law also vests Russia's regional authorities with additional powers to introduce further limitations. They can, for example, suspend subsidy payments to the draft-eligible orphans until they report to the draft office. So, another nice little thing. Of course, everyone should abuse orphans. It's totally normal in Russia at this point. This signals, by the way, that, the state, if you had any doubts before, this is just pure fascism. Like, straight up. A military notification about the summons thing is officially considered delivered 7 days after its publication in the Unified Draft Register. Not until the person sees it. No. They just publish it. And after 7 days, you can go to jail or suffer the consequences. By the way, it applies regardless of whether it had been sent electronically or delivered in person. At this point, its recipient is barred from leaving the country. People subject to military duty are also expected to keep an eye out on the register themselves, and if they miss the draft notice, it's their own problem. For now, the Gosduma has passed the amendments in the third reading. To take effect, they have to be signed by the president, and that'll happen very soon. What is unclear is when the provisions regarding the unified register will become effective, given that the register itself is, basically yet to be created. Sort of. There have been rumors about how it is in the later stages of being made, basically. The point of this new legislation is to render the citizens even more defenseless before this random state power, and to the draft offices, and to simplify the procedures of seasonal conscription, contract recruitment, and mobilization, of course. And, at this point, new round of mobilization is just a matter of time. I don't think they'll announce it publicly because technically, according to law, Russian law that is, again, funny, right? But the first one hasn't even ended yet because there is no order for it ending, so it's just bizarre anyways. As an example of what these changes mean in practice, a person can now be registered in the military reserves in absentia. Until now, he had to report to the draft office, go through a medical exam, and receive a copy of the decision about his eligibility for service. The procedure has been totally waived. And, with respect to contract service, the amendments are geared towards enabling the authorities to conduct mass conscriptions just like they did in the early days of the war. According to some unverified data, and this is literally, I'll put this in air quotes, some unverified data. Yeah, it happens in the show. I'm sorry, but at least I say it because don't ask me silly questions about this. It's fine. Well, apparently Russia's forces are planning to recruit about 400,000 new contract soldiers by the end of the year. Any citizen will now be able to sign a contract with the army, even if he has no training, even if he's in the military reserve. Yeah, just random. The same law waives the former scruples about mandatory term conscripts in the past. They can only sign a contract 3 months after completing their initial tour of duty. Now this stipulation is, of course, gone. Finally, the amended law will deprive citizens of the legal tools they need to appeal the draft commission's decisions and to defend their right to deferral or exemption. And, what happens to be done then? Well, you see, leaving the country before anything happens is a fairly reliable way how to evade the draft, but this is a highly personal decision, of course, and, you can't really expect hundreds of thousands of people to stand ready to leave the country at a moment's notice. What's important is that advising people to leave Russia as the only possible defense against the draft quite disempowers those for whom leaving the draft is not an option. It creates an impression that there is no other methods for defending one's rights. People who will remain in the country, in Russia that is, need to realize that they have a right not to go to war, and they have various available grounds for deferrals, medical exemptions, or alternative service. This, by the way, is a PSA for my Russian audience. These people will have to advocate for those rights by all available means, and even through, well, resistance, if need be. This is, by the way, what the lawyer said. And here I'll put in one of my snarky comments. Well, obviously nothing happened, no one went on the streets. However, there's a new petition on change.org. Yes, that totally not Russian site, which has no impact in Russia, which ignores all this anyway, so it's a massive shock of naivety, but still. At least it's better than, well, nothing, I guess, or I don't even know. Change.org I don't think will really work in Russian in this case. Basically, yeah, even when the lawyers state that you might have to resist and protest and all you do is change.org petition in a country where those things don't work, I really don't hold that high hopes about the situation. Because everyone's still recommending just the usual situation about how, going against the grain is probably your best bet, since they always send the guys who are meek and quiet types to the front first. If you protest, it's harder to send you. And in relation to this, I also wanted to look at how Putin has actually changed his plans for his mobilization, through the whole process of the whole war. First of all, on March the 5th, Putin stated that only professionals, officers and contract soldiers will be taking part in the military operation in Ukraine. He assured Russians that not even a single conscript would be involved in the war, and said that the Russian authorities have no intention of deploying any. Putin then thanked citizens who have helped to report enlistment officers to volunteer, but he also mentioned that their help is currently not needed, and he was also confident at the time that he won't need this. 3 days later, on March 8th, International Women's Day, on this address, he reiterated and promised the women of Russia that mandatory service conscripts are, quote, are not participating in combat and are not going to. He also vowed that Russia will not draft soldiers from the reserves. On the side note, to those of you who know Putin, he also promised that he won't increase the pension age, but, it's Putin and his promises. It is what it is. And then, there's a lot of people who, ask why I think that Russia always lies. And the answer is pretty simple, because I have a ton of documentation just literally proving that Russia always lies. It's what they do. It is a part of their existence and, an immutable part of the very thing that keeps the whole country together. And you'll see why further on in this episode yourselves. The very next day, on March the 9th, Russian Defense Ministry acknowledges that there are actually conscripts fighting in the war. Quote, unfortunately, several instances of conscripts serving in units of the Russian armed forces are participating in the conduct of the special military operation on the territory of Ukraine. They discovered this. First of all, and this is again more for the new listeners here, I don't know how your countries would react, to the very statement that your president just promises something and just blatantly lies and find out the next day that, no, there are, your conscripts serving there. It is what it is. And now, well, there was a quiet for a bit, except mothers who were worried about their regular conscripts and stuff, but then September came. September the 13th, 2022. Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, stated that there will be no mobilization in Russia. At that point, everyone knew there would be mobilization because Peskov said there wouldn't be. That's literally how it operates. He told reporters at the time, at the moment, no, this is not on the table. The previous day, by the way, he had refused to answer a question about mobilization and advised journalists to speak to the Defense Ministry. The Defense Ministry, of course, declined to do any comments. Now, let's skip ahead a week to September the 21st. This is when Putin declared mobilization. He said the measure was necessary because Russia was now facing, quote, the entire military machine of the collective West. At the same time, he maintains at the time that the campaign is only a partial mobilization. Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, stated that 300,000 people will be called up, but the section of Putin's official mobilization order that presumably contained the number of soldiers was just classified. Putin then assured Russians that the draft will primarily affect people who have undergone mandatory military service, who have a military occupation specialty, and who have had relevant experience. In obvious reality, that was all a lie. I mean, seriously, what else did you expect? And army called up literally everyone without any restrictions, numerous people with no experience at all, and, well, many of them were sent to the battlefield unequipped and without any training. And here you go. October 31st. Because, this isn't over just yet. The Russian Defense Ministry at this point declared that mobilization is complete. Military spokesman Igor Konashenkov stated that no more draft orders will be served and that enlistment offices are returning to normal operations. At the same time, Putin does not issue a decree ending mobilization, which is why it's still technically ongoing. Our buddy Peskov, the spokesman, will also later say that the president has consulted with the lawyers and determined that such a decree is, quote, legally unnecessary. And finally, on April the 11th this year, the Russian State Duma rushed through these new set of amendments that I spoke about in the part 1, making everything more hard and terrible and all this stuff. Dmitry Peskov, in response to the situation, claims that the changes are a necessary part of refining the military registration system. When asked whether the authorities will use electronic notices if a second wave of mobilization is declared, he responds, and of course, you can probably recognize this, there will be no second wave. Which is, as, well, every sane person should. We now know that the second wave of mobilization is just forthcoming, inevitable, and, come hell or high water, that will happen. And I know because Peskov literally just blatantly stated that it won't. This, by the way, is, once again, this is for the new listeners, this is why I totally don't believe in any nuclear war ever happening, because if they were planning to drop some nukes somewhere, they would be very hush-hush about it. They never do what they say openly. They always just keep it down. And, just another amazing day to be in Russia, I suppose. But to turn to our good old show's friend and buddy and nemesis, and by the way, a person whose caricature we're going to put on some t-shirts and sell to people, you just have to email me. I've checked the previous emails. I will respond to them in one go. Because, again, I don't sleep already, and I have a lot of things to do, and I'll get to it. I promise I'll take some sleep and get some sleep, and then I will wake up and finish this stuff. Don't worry. We still have some of these t-shirts remaining. There's just going to be 15 of them. They're all going to be signed. They're going to be very beautiful. And all the money is going to go to Ukraine. Of course, obviously. Because, well, I don't see any other way how I could physically be more evil towards Mr. Girkin. And Mr. Girkin, to those of you who don't know, is a war criminal. He literally started the whole insurrection thing in Donbass. He led basically an army of Russian mercenaries, which is a popular thing these days. Everyone has a mercenary unit. It's not just Wagner, by the way. There's plenty of them running around at this point. And he ran the whole thing, forced under gunpoint the referendum to be held in Crimea. Basically, his role in this was to literally take a gun, enter the parliament building of Crimea, and force the deputies present there to vote for having a referendum, or, they'd be shot. Because, that's how referendums work, I presume. So this guy, he's also a monarchist and super ultra-far right opposition to Putin, which makes him interesting because he thinks Putin is not violent enough and that Putin is not doing enough to win the war. And despite his totally batshit insane political views, because I posted a long thing about this on Twitter, please go check it out. I really want to build up my followers again. Basically, he considers that everyone in the West is living in, in a world that would be best described by someone who's so outside to the fringe that he doesn't even register on the map. Like, he believes all the conspiracy theories because he obviously hasn't visited anywhere. But yeah, he runs his little show, and Girkin and Friends is a popular theme, and we use him all the time because he's a very valuable source of information. Now, and one interesting thing that had happened is that, Girkin started to show some political ambitions as well. Well, in a way, ish. See, he created his Union of Disgruntled Patriots. And, that gathers him and all of his friends that I mentioned in the show constantly, Mikhail Kalashnikov and even the Kvachkov guy, the totally crazy general. And, there has been a crackdown on them. You always have asked me, why still is Girkin alive? Well, now I know that he probably won't be for a bit, because one of the group, who was a kind of a field doctor, he just gave lectures in Russia somewhere out there, training the new soldiers of Russia to, apply first aid. During this, he was arrested, and, there's going to be a court on the 18th for discrediting the Russian army because he allowed himself to, criticize the real situation on the field there, which is quite miserable and lack of everything, basically. Now, the problem here is that the guy who was arrested is, actually had fought himself in the war, and he's also gotten a medal straight from Putin. His medal was for bravery, just saying. So, yeah. And now, as we just found out, Girkin himself is, going to be questioned about his own discreditation, of the Russian military, which involves literally everyone, because previously it did not apply to Wagner Group, but Prigozhin pushed that one through, and now, of course, it does. And that just is yet another part of this whole militarization, I think, vandalization of the whole country, if you think about it. Prigozhin, on his own part, of course, made a tout towards Girkin and insulted him because, that's what he does. Prigozhin haven't sat in the prison for 10 years, by the way, himself, so he's a prisoner through and through. Another nice little reason to advertise my prison culture episodes. You seriously won't understand this war without them. These give you a supreme understanding of this. At least I think so. I have to think so in a way. But you see, Girkin is now facing problems because of the situation, since Putin has decided that, it's okay when those random marginals who are totally weird criticize you now and then, but now they have political ambitions. And that there is unacceptable because, as we all know, no one in Russia can be more patriotic than Putin himself. And, kind of lucky for us as well, since Girkin's military data is usually of such high quality, then, Ukrainian army would run into massive problems if only Putin will listen to Girkin. But he never does. Like at all. And it's crazy. But Prigozhin managed to call Girkin the worst way possible. He mentioned him in the same context as the so-called Petukhi, the lower caste of the Russian prison system. Again, go listen to those episodes. They're actually really good. Which is a very huge insult in the traditionally extremely homophobic Russian prison culture and Russian culture in general. To which, by the way, Strelkov answered that, obviously with massive denials. Prigozhin also had, by the way, complained that there's new forces in the Russian army, not in Wagner Group right now, but in the army, that are being conscripted from prison population. And Prigozhin made a huge noise and fuss about the fact that in those units, apparently these Petukhi, the lower caste, fight together with the regulars. And, that's totally prison laws and someone protesting against it. And I quote here, Prigozhin states that Russia has always understood and lived by these prison culture laws. As a side note there, to you guys who actually were there with the whole Trace incident, this is the reason why I asked in that conversation that I only consider people Russia experts if they can answer me the question of, do they know the difference between the red and a black colony? A prison colony, that is. Because that thing ties together to this. And if Prigozhin, chief of Wagner Group, blatantly states that, he'd like all Russia to live by these prison laws, and Putin uses that language and those value systems constantly, then yeah, you probably need to understand this. Just a bit of a quip here, while I still can do it. So now his buddies, quite poor as they are now struggling to basically set everything in order. And, well, we see yet another phase of this famed infighting, which turns out to be a surprise to people at New York Times, who I kind of doubt even read English, because why would they? They have editors for that. And currently, I don't know how this will go down, but the situation is not looking nice, because once again, the conflicts have escalated between the usual stuff that we mentioned, last time, maybe a bit before that, about Russia's Muslims and Russia's ultranationalists fighting against each other and, doing way weird, crazy things. Especially right now, there are complaints that in the Chechen regions, the Caucasus and all that stuff, they're trying to enforce Sharia law there as well. Because, in this war, there's never enough madness or too much madness. It just is constantly. So, So this would, I guess, probably be it for today. Hey, fighting for Bakhmut. But again, you'll hear about that on your whatever mainstream media that you're watching or something. It's just, once again, getting crazier and crazier. And I truly hope that atrocities will end and we'll get some peace and I will finally understand what it's like to sleep during the nights once again. But yeah, thank you for listening. And if you want to become our patron, you like the show, then you can go to patreon.com/theeasternborder and become our patron there. And, you can also go to our homepage, theeasternborder.lv. There you can listen to all the episodes without ads, and we have a button that allows you to make a one-time donation. And if you're considering the shirt, well, then just email us at theeasternborder@gmail.com, and we'll put it down until I get to read all these mails. It's gonna be interesting. I also have my Twitter to take care of, because, I really would like my efforts to not be in vain and, reach as many people as possible. That's kind of why I do this show and why I have this mission statement. Oh yeah, one final thing though about that whole situation. Apparently BBC grabbed an interview with Elon Musk, and he then posted a kind of 4 rules about what the ideal reporter should be. As that was just at the end of my totally not sleeping period, I responded to this because, oh boy, it's really fun for computer specialists to point out how everyone should be doing what I'm doing, basically, and sacrificing their sleep and fact-checking all the data and everything. It's really hard to do, guys. It's not an easy job, so again, check that one out. And finally, one last thing is that I noticed that how Twitter actually has changed, because I've been away for quite a bit. It's not to my liking, because again, just as soon as I started getting some traction, more and more trolls arrived, but I know that, you can just ignore them and they'll go away eventually. There's no point of arguing with them at all. However, I noticed people sharing interesting news from the western part, and as I fact-checked a couple of them, I figured out that the main problem with the news on Twitter, which are very radical and loud and everything, comes from the fact that it's always some Western source quoting another Western source, and then, the real authentic source is somewhere down the line, nobody paying real attention to. So, would kind of explain quite a lot of things. A case in point was the fact that in some of the regions, which are closer to the border with Ukraine, the local governors have decided that they will not be holding this 9th of May parade, which is their most important event of all times, because of the Great War and all that not. And they're not going to do this because, officially because of security concerns, but practically because, every piece of equipment that they could send to the front has been sent to the front. They literally have nothing to parade around, so they just had no other choice. This quite, interesting, albeit, somewhat neutral news was published on Twitter as I quote, Putin cancels Victory Day parade, cites security reasons. Putin has actually nothing to do with this, and, just be careful with what you read, and I try to kind of fact-check everything for you there, so hope that works. Haven't forgotten Mastodon as well. I'll get back there as well. It's just that, yet again, overworking takes its toll on me. But yeah, right now, this finally then would be it. I'll go and grab a bit of sleep. I really need another hour or 2 of napping. And we'll be back as soon as the situation either improves or changes or whatever. I'm pretty sure I've forgotten to mention something here, but, this, as long as it is, I'll get all the other stuff next time. До свидания, товарищи. And as always, remember that happiness is mandatory.